The last photograph. The doorbell rang at 2:17 p.m. on a humid Georgia afternoon, but I didn't rush to answer it. My knees weren't what they used to be, and besides, I knew exactly who it was. Through the lace curtains of my parlor window, I could see my daughter Madison's silver Mercedes parked in the driveway, gleaming like a mirror under the relentless sun. I am Patricia Whitmore, 74 years old, widowed for 22 years, and a retired portrait photographer who once had a studio on Peachtree Street in Atlanta. For 36 years, my entire world revolved around Madison, my only child. I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace to pay for her private school tuition. I worked weddings every weekend for 10 years straight, lugging heavy equipment up church steps and standing for hours in heels that made my feet bleed, all to send her to NYU. I drove a rusted Chevy for 15 years while she cruised around campus in a brand new convertible I'd bought her for graduation. I never complained. I told myself this was what mothers did. We built scaffolding beneath our children so they could climb higher than we ever dreamed. But that Tuesday afternoon, Madison proved that some people see scaffolding as nothing more than something to kick away once they've reached the top. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. I made my way slowly through the hallway, past the walls covered with photographs I'd taken over my 40-year career. Brides and grooms. Newborns wrapped in soft blankets. Families gathered on porches just like mine. Each frame held a moment of someone else's joy, preserved forever in silver gelatin and love. When I opened the door, Madison didn't greet me. She was already on her phone, one manicured finger held up in that universal gesture that meant, "Wait, I'm more important than you." "No, Trevor, I told you to book the Maldives, not Bali," she snapped into her phone. "Do I have to do everything myself?" She pushed past me into the house, her expensive perfume, something French and cloying, filling the air. She was wearing white linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Trevor was her fiancé, a cryptocurrency trader who spoke in incomprehensible jargon and had the personality of lukewarm oatmeal. I closed the door and followed her into the kitchen, where she'd already helped herself to a glass of water from my filtered pitcher. "Mama, I need a favor," she announced, finally putting down her phone. I lowered myself carefully into one of the kitchen chairs. My hip had been aching all week. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to co-sign a loan for me." I blinked. "A loan? For what?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Trevor and I found the most incredible townhouse in Buckhead. 3 stories, rooftop terrace, walking distance from all the best restaurants. It's perfect, but we're just a little short on the down payment. Like $60,000 short." $60,000? My voice came out as barely a whisper. "It's not a big deal, Mama. You'll just be a co-signer. You won't actually have to pay anything. It's just a formality to help us qualify for the mortgage." She pulled out her phone again, already distracted. "The realtor needs an answer by Friday or we lose it." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Her hair was freshly highlighted, probably a $300 job. Her nails were done in some complicated design with tiny crystals. She wore a watch I'd never seen before, rose gold with diamonds around the face. "Madison," I said slowly, "I'm 74 years old, living on Social Security and a small pension. If you default on that loan, they'll come after me. I could lose this house." She rolled her eyes. "We're not going to default. Trevor makes 6 figures. This is just to help us get started." She glanced around the kitchen with barely concealed disdain. "Besides, it's not like you need this big old house all to yourself. You should really think about downsizing anyway. Maybe one of those nice senior communities with activities and stuff." Something cold settled in my chest. "This is my home, Madison. Your father and I bought this house before you were born. You took your first steps in that hallway. I taught you to ride a bike in that driveway." "Exactly. It's full of old memories." She said old memories, the way someone might say toxic mold. "You're literally sitting here all alone, surrounded by dusty photographs and furniture from the 1980s. Don't you want to enjoy your golden years? Meet people your own age?" "I like my life just fine." She sighed dramatically. "Look, Mama, I'm trying to build a future here. Trevor and I want to start a family soon. We need a proper home for that. You always said you wanted grandchildren, right? Well, this is how you can help make that happen." My throat tightened. She knew exactly which buttons to push. For years, I dropped hints about grandchildren, showed her the tiny vintage baby clothes I'd found at estate sales, talked about how the spare bedroom would make a perfect nursery. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. "Think fast. I need an answer by Wednesday." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing. I'm having a huge engagement party next month. 200 people. I sent you the invitation, but I need to know if you're coming so I can finalize the seating chart." "Of course I'm coming. I'm your mother." "Great. The dress code is black tie. You'll need to buy something appropriate. Maybe something from Nordstrom? Not one of those old lady dresses you usually wear." She wrinkled her nose. "Oh, and gifts are optional, but if you want to contribute, Trevor and I are saving up for a honeymoon in Europe. There's a fund on our wedding website." Then she was gone, leaving behind only that cloying perfume and the echo of her heels on my hardwood floors. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after she left, watching the shadows lengthen across the floor. My father's old camera sat on the shelf by the window, a Leica M3 from 1954, the camera that had started my love affair with photography. He'd given it to me for my 16th birthday, and I'd carried it everywhere, learning to see the world through its viewfinder. That camera had paid for Madison's childhood. Every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every dance recital, I'd photographed them all, and I'd also photographed other people's children to pay for hers. I stood up slowly and walked to my office, the small room at the back of the house where I'd once edited photos late into the night. The walls were lined with filing cabinets containing negatives and prints from 40 years of work. And in the bottom drawer of my desk, I kept something I hadn't looked at in months: my financial files. I pulled out the folder and spread the papers across my desk. My social security statement, my pension information, my savings account balance. And beneath those, a stack of receipts and bank statements I'd been collecting for the past 2 years. Madison didn't know I kept records. She assumed I was too old, too trusting, too grateful for her occasional visits to pay attention to details. But I'd been paying attention. There was the $5,000 I'd loaned her 3 years ago for emergency car repairs. She'd bought a designer handbag instead. I'd seen it on her Instagram. The $3,200 for medical bills that turned out to be a spa weekend in Savannah. The $8,000 for business startup costs for a company that never materialized. The $2,500 for Trevor's mother's surgery, when Trevor's mother was perfectly healthy and living in a golf community in Arizona. Over the past 5 years, Madison had borrowed nearly $30,000 from me. Not once had she paid back a single cent. I added up the numbers again, my hands shaking. $30,000. Money I'd saved by skipping doctor's appointments, buying generic medications, eating rice and beans for dinner, keeping the thermostat at 62 degrees in winter. And now she wanted me to risk my home so she could have a townhouse in Buckhead. I closed the folder and sat back in my chair. Through the window, I could see my small garden, the tomatoes I'd planted in the spring, the roses I'd been tending for 20 years, the bird bath where cardinals came to drink every morning. This was my life. Small maybe, quiet, but mine. I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. My old friend Margaret Shun, who'd been a wedding photographer when I was starting out. We'd lost touch after she moved to Charleston, but I'd heard through the grapevine that she now ran one of the most successful photography galleries in the South. She answered on the third ring. "Patricia Whitmore. As I live and breathe. I thought you'd forgotten about me." Her voice made me smile for the first time in hours. "Hi, Margaret. I know it's been too long. 3 years, 2 months, but who's counting?" She laughed. "What's going on, honey? You sound tired." "I am tired," I admitted. "Margaret, do you remember that conversation we had at the APA conference in 2019? You said if I ever wanted to sell some of my work, you'd be interested." There was a pause. "I remember. Are you serious?" "Very serious. Patricia, your portfolio is extraordinary. I've been telling you for years that your portraits belong in museums. Especially that series you did in the 70s, the one documenting the textile workers in the mills. That's historically significant work. I'd almost forgotten about that series. 23 photographs taken over 2 years, documenting the faces and hands of women who worked in the cotton mills outside Atlanta. Women with stories etched into their faces like topographical maps. Do you really think anyone would buy them? Buy them? Patricia, collectors would fight over them. Documentary photography from that era, especially work by female photographers, is incredibly valuable right now. If you're willing to part with the original prints and negatives, I could probably get you $60,000 to $80,000 for the complete series. My breath caught. 80,000? Maybe more. And that's just the Mill series. If you have other work you're willing to sell, we could do a whole retrospective. Your career spanned 40 years, Patricia. You have images that no one else has. That matters. We talked for another hour. She asked me to photograph my prints and send them to her email. She explained the consignment process, the gallery's commission, the timeline for a show. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, but not from fear. From possibility. I spent the next 3 days photographing my life's work. The Mill series. The portraits of civil rights activists I'd taken in the 60s. The series on Appalachian midwives. The documentation of Atlanta's changing neighborhoods. Each photograph was a memory. Each one had a story. But they weren't doing anyone any good sitting in filing cabinets in my office. Margaret called back on Friday morning. Patricia, I've shown your work to 3 serious collectors. They're very interested. I think we can get you $95,000 for everything. I sat down hard in my desk chair. $95,000? And that's conservative. Your work deserves to be seen, Patricia. It deserves to be preserved in institutions where future generations can study it. You're not just selling photographs. You're ensuring your legacy. That afternoon I called Madison. Mama, did you make a decision about the cosign? She asked immediately. Because Trevor's getting impatient and… No, I said simply. There was a stunned silence. No. I'm not going to cosign your loan, Madison. I'm 74 years old. And I'm not risking my home so you can have a townhouse you can't afford. I cannot believe you're being this selfish. Her voice rose to a screech. After everything I've done for you, who drives you to your doctor's appointments? Who checks in on you? You haven't driven me to a doctor's appointment in 4 years, I said calmly. I take Uber. And you check in when you need something. That is so unfair. Madison, in the past 5 years you've borrowed $30,000 from me. You haven't paid back a single cent. You've lied about what you needed the money for. You've treated me like an ATM machine. I always meant to pay you back. With what money? You can't even afford your townhouse down payment. I heard her breathing heavily on the other end. Fine. Fine. If that's how you want to be, don't expect me to keep wasting my time visiting you. That's your choice, I said and hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter than I had in years. The next month passed in a blur. Margaret arranged for a courier to collect my photographs. She organized a retrospective show at her gallery. She sent me a contract and a check for $95,000. I deposited the check and paid off the small mortgage I still had on my house. I scheduled all the medical appointments I'd been putting off. I bought a new camera, a beautiful digital Leica that felt like coming home. And I made one more call. Madison, it's your mother. What do you want? Her voice was cold. I want you to come to Charleston on October 15th. There's something I'd like you to see. She showed up at the gallery in head-to-toe designer clothing, Trevor trailing behind her like an expensive accessory. She looked around at the white walls, the professional lighting, the well-dressed crowd sipping wine. What is this? She asked suspiciously. It's a retrospective of my work, I said. I sold my photography collection to this gallery. Her face went white. You sold, but those were supposed to be mine. My inheritance. They were mine to sell, I said quietly. I spent 40 years creating that work. And now it's going to be preserved in museums and private collections where people will actually appreciate it. How much did you get? Her voice was sharp with calculation. Enough to pay off my house. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to stop worrying about money every single day. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. You're unbelievable. You sold my inheritance to what? Spite me? No, honey, I said, and my voice was sad but firm. I sold it to save myself. I walked away from her then, moving through the gallery to look at my own work hanging on walls where strangers could see it. The mill workers' faces, strong and tired and beautiful. The activists from the 60s, young and fierce and hopeful. The midwives with their capable hands. The changing neighborhoods, the shifting light, the passage of time made visible. This was my legacy. Not money in a bank account for an ungrateful daughter to spend. Not co-signing loans or sacrificing my security. But these images, these stories, these moments preserved forever. Margaret found me standing in front of a photograph I'd taken in 1967. A young woman holding a baby, both of them backlit by a window, their faces soft with love. "That's my favorite," Margaret said quietly. "The light is extraordinary." I smiled. "That's me. And that baby is Madison." "Really?" She studied it more closely. "You can see so much love in your face." "I did love her," I said. "I still do. But I've learned something important. Loving someone doesn't mean destroying yourself to make them comfortable." Behind us, I heard Madison's heels clicking on the gallery floor, moving toward the exit. I didn't turn around. "Are you okay?" Margaret asked. I looked at the photograph, at my younger self, holding my daughter with such tenderness and hope, and then at the room full of my life's work finally being seen. "I'm better than okay," I said. "For the first time in 36 years, I'm free." The end.